episode 47 of This and That and What a Fuck More. In this edition, I will be focusing on energy issues in Europe. And I want to say that I'm absolutely astounded by the levels of destruction that the EU leadership is bringing on to the citizens of the EU. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I see these things and I just look at it and I make my own judgment. But to me, this looks very sinister. It is as if there is a great plan to destroy Europe, to destroy the European industries, to destroy the European societies. The industries are now being destroyed with the energy issue, and the societies are being destroyed with the immigration issue. And that is really disturbing. What is most disturbing to me is the fact that it is quite obvious that there's no potential leadership in the EU that can lead them out of this shithole in which this current leadership is throwing them in. I am absolutely lost for words. I cannot believe that the industrial core of Germany is allowing that leadership to do what they are doing. I just cannot believe it. I've always had a lot of respect for the German people and for the German, especially German technology. And from that, it was quite obvious that the Germans are intelligent people, and most important, they are people that are paying attention to detail. They don't take shortcuts. But it looks to me like that Green Party and that woke people has got the German nation as a whole by the throat. But I have had discussions with friends of mine, and I think a big problem is that the younger generation, they are so saturated with this woke shit that they have totally lost touch with reality. And from what we are seeing and from the things that I am reading, Europe is going to have a hell of a winter. And there is talks that people are going to freeze to death. Plus, there's a major issue in the agricultural environment. The droughts and the heat waves and so is destroying the crops. And I will do a skidmark on that. And I have got the theory that a large proportion of the underperformance of the crops under these conditions is due to the fact that the GM plants, they cannot handle severe climate change issues. I see that Russia is heading for a record crop again. But you must take note, Russia has banned GM seed in Russia, and the Monsanto chemicals is also not allowed there. So obviously their crops are handling the changes, the drought and the heat, and so much better than the GM product. But let's leave it there. Let's look at energy. And then I'm going to start it with this tweet by Mari. Advice for Europe this coming winter. And it was a reply to Walkabout that posted, drape your Ukrainian flag over your shoulders. It will keep you warm. Good luck with that one. And then we've got this one from Peter. And I like this oak. He comes out with some good stuff. In Britain they are now talking about using libraries and museums as warm places where people who cannot afford to heat their homes can come and get warm. People will freeze because of the climate change fanatics. But listen carefully. Libraries and museums, those are massive fucking buildings. How much energy are you going to use to heat them up? Like my friend used to say, the cleverness is broken. And then we've got this. This is a global obscenity dressed up as saving the planet. Bloomberg reports average annual household energy cost will almost double in Britain to about £3,500 or more than $6,000. People preparing to spend the winter in a single room to reduce heating costs. I cannot believe that in 2022 this is where we find ourselves. And what is the basis for this? Because of the sanctions that Europe, on instigation by the US, has implemented against Russia. And now Europe is paying severely, but they don't have a reverse gear. Want to see your energy future? Just look at Britain's mess. Thousands of people will die in Europe this winter because of the energy policies driven by the climate action agenda. Not Putin's war, it's a global obscenity dressed up as saving the planet. And that is true. This alternative energy, renewable energy, is nice to have for a guy that lives out in the country in a house. And he can put panels on his solar panels on his roof, things like that. But when you run a country, those renewables, they can fill in a small portion, but not the critical stuff. More than half of the UK households risks falling into energy poverty this winter. Bloomberg reported on Thursday, citing data from the consultancy Briekmerke Partners. Skyrocketing bills are also reportedly threatening power suppliers with rising debt that can't be repaid. The report warned that the crisis could have a bigger impact on households than the global financial crisis. Bills are set to jump by roughly 80% starting from October, when colder weather boosts energy demand. Winter energy bills are expected to be more than triple what they were last year. This is really sad. And then there's this. The average annual household energy bills in the UK are forecast to exceed £3,500 from October, according to the Office of the National Statistics. That amounts to more than 11% of median household disposable income. The National Health Service warned that this month the UK could be a humanitarian crisis involving ill health, excess deaths and rising inequality if the government does not take urgent action on rising energy bills. Now, what can the fucking government do? The most important thing they can do is say, stop these sanctions. And then get on a plane and go to Moscow and sit in front of Putin and say, sorry, we fucked up. How can we fix this? And then listen. Because with all the Russophobia that this UK specifically is fuming, just ask yourself, how willing will the Russians be to help them out? European countries supporting Ukraine against Russia should brace for a full suspension of natural gas supplies by Moscow during the upcoming winter. Spanish Defense Minister Margarita Robles has warned. We are going to have a winter of great suffering, the cabinet member told Radio National on Wednesday. In Europe, we have to work hard to be ready to deal with it. Robles claimed that Russian President Vladimir Putin is already throttling the supply of gas to the continent, apparently referring to the reduction in deliveries by Russian energy giant Gazprom. And listen to this shit. There is a lot of actual facts in there, but there's also a lot of bullshit in there. They brought this onto themselves. We are going to have a winter of great suffering. Yippee! She's not going to suffer. She's going to be happy in her mansion with her electricity bill paid by taxpayers. European citizens better wake up. And then we have this. The company has blamed external factors for the loss of capacity, noting that Ukraine is refusing to pump gas through one of the routes running through its territory. Gazprom has also pointed to the sanctions-related delay in the returning of the German-made turbine or Nord Stream 1 pipeline following maintenance. European nations, meanwhile, have accused Moscow of reducing the flow for political motives. The EU, which has pledged to remove Russian fossil fuels from energy mix within the coming years, in retaliation for Russia's attack against Ukraine, is facing a severe gas shortage, with alternatives to proving more expensive and less accessible. They are fucking stupid in the EU. I cannot understand it. How in the world do they think they are going to put up alternatives for the Russian energy? This is just as stupid as if the world will turn around and say we're going to put up alternatives for Saudi oil. Europe branded third world economy. The reason for this is sanctions imposed on Russia over the conflict in Ukraine, a senior contributor to Forbes magazine claims. The fallout of the sanctions imposed on Russia over the conflict in Ukraine has turned Europe into a third world of the Western world economies, a senior contributor to the magazine has claimed. These days, the European stock market is the worst in the Western world, underperforming the US by 10 basis points. The most significant headwind for such a state of affairs has been the Russian sanctions on energy as punishment for its war with Ukraine. Well, those sanctions, the EU, they allowed the US to tell them what to do, and then they went and they did it, and now they're in the shit. The author advised investors against putting their money into Europe, at least until Brussels figures out how to compensate for the massive reduction in energy supply from Russia and how to mitigate the harmful impact of its own sanctions. There is no ceasefire. If there is no ceasefire in Ukraine soon, chances are that Europe becomes so desperate this winter and supply chain so stretched that it has no choice but to relax some of the sanctions and convince non-EU partners to relabel and transship Russian commodities to look in with their own rules, but really doing an end around, he wrote. The problem that I see here is with all the hatred that these Europeans are pouring out on the Russians, on Russia as a country and Russians as a nation. They must not expect any leniency from the Russians. Until some solution is provided, Europe will remain the third world of the Western world economies, saying that this was how one investor on Twitter had recently described the situation on the continent to him. Well, that is the reality. Most idiotic policy decision made with the Ukraine was Europe having been in receipt of reliable Russian energy supplies for years, being convinced to attack Russia via sanctions and decided to end those reliable supplies unilaterally and not realizing what moronic decision it would be. And this is from the Sirius report. And this is the truth that this guy is talking. It makes no sense. They had to be completely clueless. Even in the optimal case, if LNG replacements were available to cover 100% of the energy, would you be able to run the German industry at those prices? Can the EU survive without German industry? Norway refused to lower gas price for Europe. On you buddies. Norway has refused to lower gas price for Europe. Norway will not cut natural prices for importers in the European Union. And I can understand it, but I think the EU has gotten a slap on the back here. They didn't expect this. And then there's this. I predict a riot. Europe could see a revolution if energy prices aren't brought under control, says the Czech Justice Minister Pavel, in foreboding warning to EU states as he decries lack of solutions on the table in the Czech Republic and across Europe to avoid subjecting citizens to miserable conditions, with some countries already seeing protests, like these Brits burning sky-high energy bills. Well, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of riots. And the problem for Europe is going to become very clear when the riots start. Those immigrants, they must understand, they are from countries and has got a cultural background that is not disciplined. They are basically barbarians. They are going to wreck Europe. Soaring energy costs across the EU is causing temporary stoppages at production sites and could lead to product shortages, the Finnish company Meta Tissue warned. During the recent weeks, Meta Tissue has had to curtail its production both in its Zelina and Kreuzau mills, Slovakia and Germany, for several days because of the high energy price peaks. Russia can afford to shut down Europe gas for a year. Russia could cut off all the gas to the EU for just over 1 year without adverse consequences for the economy. As long as oil prices and export levels remain at current high levels, Russia's current account surplus will be enough to sustain it even with a cut-off to its main gas market. Something to think about, and then go and rethink this sanctions shit. Now this little graphic is just giving you an indication of what the cost is per unit for electricity. Look at all those prices in the EU and then look at that price in Russia. 41 against 403, 401 in Germany, 469, 546, 656 in Italy. I wonder who is the winner here. And then this one is quite a sobering one. The US military is dependent on Russian energy in Europe, the equivalent of 470,000 tons of oil annually. Thus, the US is helping fund Russia's war. What is particularly interesting about this infographic is just how deep the US military is entrenched in Europe. And look at that, and if Russia turns that one tap down, close that one pipe, what then? And then we've got this guy. EU cannot let Putin set energy cost. Chancellor Karl Nehammer called on Sunday for the EU to impose a cap on power prices and decouple electricity charges from the price of gas. And you can read the rest if you want to. Look at this fucking idiot. Where do they come from to decide what Russia must charge for their gas? They can't. And this bullshit that Putin is manipulating the price. Bullshit. They manipulated themselves. But blame it on Putin. That was the easy thing. And then we get to the what the fuck. Now this what the fuck is actually really a what the fuck. And it comes from the UK, where Liz Truss has said she's ready to use nuclear weapons. And she's ready to declare China UK enemy number one. That woman is going to get the UK wiped off the maps. Breaking, NATO flagship UK aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales has broken down shortly after launching from Portsmouth Naval Base. And how is that? Broken down shortly after launch. But they want to battle Russia. And on that note, please hit the like, hit the subscribe, share the damn thing, and have a great evening.